Hello, and welcome to the Empowered Learning Podcast. This is your host, Andy Bennett. On today's episode, we welcome Nikkie Handy. Nikkie is a lifelong educator, a leader and mentor in the space of brain development, a fearless speaker of truth, wisdom seeker, and currently serves as the Regional Director for Fueling Brains, an exciting solution revolutionizing early childhood education, one brain at a time. Welcome, Nikkie.
Hey, Nikkie, how you doing?
I'm well. Good to see you, Andy. How are you?
Good to see you too. I'm great. I'm great. It's a beautiful day in Southern Colorado, and your old stomping grounds. I know that it has been a minute. We didn't want to admit how long it's been, but it has been a long time since we saw each other.
Couple wrinkles, couple gray hairs have been acquired in the interim.
A few kids, all that kind of stuff. So
exactly.
It's so awesome to reconnect with you. And from certain posts or whatever, you'd kind of reached out and said, hey, this would be really cool. And then I start reading through your bio. I'm like, my goodness, Nikkie has been busy. She's been kind of out there changing the world. So super excited to kind of dive into your educational journey, your leadership journey. But before we do that, give the listeners a little bit of history and background on yourself.
Yeah, so I like to claim the Midwest as my hometown, you could say, because my parents are a bit nomadic and they kind of, we didn't really have like roots put anywhere specifically, but my grandparents had homesteaded in Cortez, Colorado. So loosely, you could consider that a hometown, but I've been in many states in the interim. And so my own educational journey took me through it. I need to tally it, but at least 11 different schools from kindergarten to graduating high school. And through those experiences, I accumulated a lot of perspective, you could say, on the wide range of what's available in public school. And there's this sort of experience of, sink or swim in certain public schools that was tough, but I managed to float to the top and keep momentum going. And after I left high school, I started taking up a lot of work with like church-based centers, nannying work, and that sort of thing. Meanwhile, I'm going to school for pre-med. I'm thinking in my mind, I'm going to be a pediatrician, but God had other plans, of course.
Right.
And as my interest and skill set grew in early childhood, so did my career path. It crystallized, right? So along that line, I started to work my way through all the different aspects of what early childhood means and why it's so incredibly important and impactful, not just in education, but in the economy, in society. So I just started a new project about 1.5 years ago that I'm really excited to talk about. But yeah, so a lot of ground has been covered since we saw each other last.
Right?
Yeah.
I love it. So early childhood education, that is lots of different angles we can attack on that. I was an elementary teacher and administrator, so there's a difference between elementary and early child, just to throw that out there. I'm
aware.
Oh my goodness. I enjoyed elementary. Early ed was, I'm not into that kind of stuff. But anyways, God bless all of the ones out there making a difference. And to your point,
it takes a special person. It really does.
It does. You were saying that your kiddos are in middle school. There's another one. All teachers are God called. That's a mission field, no doubt about it. But there's a special place in heaven for early childhood and middle school.
I 100% agree. And you see a lot of recurring similarities there, a willingness to like speak back to authority figures, maybe some odd smells wafting by here and there.
Yeah.
There's
funny.
some similarities.
Never connected the two, but you are spot on about that. That is too funny. I love it. So man, where to start here? So you said that you kind of had this winding journey. I guess let's pick on the idea of, because you were in so many different schools, you said that kind of impacted and kind of changed course, maybe changed your mindset a little bit of as you got into your professional career. I guess what experiences from your childhood do you think shaped you into the person, the mom, the wife, the entrepreneur, the leader that you are right now? and kind of set you on the course that you are right now?
Yeah, so there's a handful of crystalline memories that really had a huge impact on me, but one that really impacts my current work was the experience of entering as a kindergartner. And my sister and I were less than a year apart in age, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being born September 8th, I missed the cutoff for public kindergarten by days.
Yeah.
So we entered kindergarten the same year, and I had basically a full year of development on my sister at that point. And the discrepancy between our performances was so incredible that it had her frustrated, red in the face, like I'm going to tear up my work type of situation, right?
Okay.
So my mom went back to the school and said, like, we got to find something else. and that teacher that we were with at that period in time in Arizona, we were in a school that, like, at least probably 75% economic disadvantage. There's a lot of poverty in that area. It's very rural. So that brings unique challenges to the education system. And that kindergarten teacher, she didn't have the capacity to differentiate her learning. Right. And so my mom went back and said, like, we got to do something for this child. We got to get her out of kindergarten. My girls are not neither of them are benefiting because they're both in the same class. So they put me in, I called it Pretty First at the time, but the public school called it Pre-First. And it was this sort of half step between kindergarten and first grade. And that teacher, I'm the only white face in the class, mind you. Okay. And at this point, I had no solid understanding of what race or didn't really have like a racial identity per se, but I knew that teacher didn't like me for some reason. And she singled me out. And I remember this one time I asked her to go to the bathroom. She wouldn't let me out of my seat. I ended up wetting myself, and the shame that I felt from that was real. So I kind of applied that experience to the inverse, right? So so nowadays when I'm working in communities where we have the minority is white, we have, a large African American population, a large Hispanic population, but also that socioeconomic disadvantage. I really can empathize with what they're experiencing and the lack of support and understanding that sometimes is handed to minorities. And it makes me more effective in my role because that connection exists. But there's like I said, there's a handful of crystalline memories from my own childhood that at a certain point when I graduated, I had this cherry offer from a financial firm to be their business controller. And it was a beautiful salary package, 401k, the works. They bought me all this office furniture, put the name on the door. And it came down to the day of, and I went in and I shook the president's hand and I said, I am so sorry, but I've been for weeks thinking about my world in absence of children and not being able to impact the lives of children. And I can't do it. Like, this is not for me. And so those experiences from my own childhood made me like fiery passionate about education, that if I could cushion or embrace any subset of children through their experiences through public school so that they can be long-term successful, I'm here for it.
I love it.
And in education, we're not building a whole lot of millionaires, but the rewards that you get from the work are not necessarily only monetary. You're talking about the reward of pouring into future generations and just knowing how impacting specific lives. That might be your future senator, your future president, your future HEB manager. That's a Texas grocery store, by the way.
I actually know HEB, yeah.
Yeah. So it just has held on to me. Just like you said, it's a calling. It's a calling. And when it's in your DNA, it's in your soul. I don't think it'll ever let you go.
Right. I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was having a conversation with another guest. I forget who it was. I've recorded a lot in the last couple of weeks here. But we talked about the fact that education and being a teacher, you have to understand that this is a long play, right? I mean, it's one of those things like if you think of investments, like if you get twitchy fingers like this and you can't ride the waves, then investment's probably not the best option for you. I think teaching is
You
the
gotta
same
have some
thing.
nerves.
You have to have some nerves. You have to see that this is going to be, you may not get your flowers, I think is how the guest put it, until years later, and be okay with that and know just that intrinsic value of, and there's those little moments. I think everybody I've talked to talks about those little moments that make an impact on you as a teacher, give you the fuel to continue on. And then on the inverse side, like you said, your terrible experience in that pre-K or pre-first classroom. It's interesting because I talk to a lot of teachers, and I think some of them have both sides. But generally speaking, it's either I wanted to get into education because this teacher was a rock star and I wanted to emulate them and touch lives like they did. Or I had the worst experience ever, and I don't want kids to ever experience that before again. And again, sometimes it's probably a mix of both of those. But when you get down to it, it's either one or the other that is like the fire underneath you of like, we got to be like that, or never again will kids in my watch experience that terrible experience.
Yeah. And I mean, I think ideally you would have that inspiration and hopefully not the trauma.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Yeah, I think I've accumulated those heroes and those inspiring stories more so in my adult experience, and
interesting, yeah.
And having the perspective to really understand how much of your heart and soul has to be poured into education. The majority of my family went into education. My mom, my sister Amber, Crystal these days is teaching online college courses. So getting those different perspectives as an adult has been my source of that sort of inspiring component. Because I think you really have to have a vision for what you're working towards, not just what you're trying to walk away from. You got to have both.
Right, I agree. You mentioned your mom and her advocating for you in that classroom, that it was not going well, and having two boys that are not as close but close. We do everything in our powers to keep the sibling rivalry at a minimum. It's not possible to eliminate it, but we do what we can. So kudos to your mom for seeing that. What life lessons did you learn from your family that you have carried on into your adulthood, either wanting to pass that on to your kids or take into your professional career, that you're like, they did it great, I want to expound upon that or emulate that?
For sure. So, I mean, the list is pretty long because I think my parents are very awesome. But when I look at my mom, I have always admired her ability to look someone in the eye and speak the truth. Regardless of whether that person is going to appreciate it, feel intimidated by it, that she has always set that example that it's worthwhile to be a truth teller, and really being able to kind of like parse that out through conversation too, to not just witness those experiences and see how she navigated that, but also the behind the scenes conversation to say, this is part of my core values. This is how I operate in the world. This is my framework.
Right.
And the fascinating thing about being a truth teller is that it will earn you long-term trust, durable trust, beyond understanding, because the people that rub shoulders with you, that you encounter through your professional career, I think especially at a certain level, you start to see that there's a lot of maneuvering that happens behind the scenes, and things can get very political, and certain people are motivated by power and control more so than like the passion of the work. But when you constantly demonstrate yourself as a truth teller, that people have an ability to trust you long term, even when things are getting tough, to say, I know that she's going to tell me the truth of this situation. There's not going to be glossing over it. There's not going to be, I'm going to tell you one thing and then go do another thing. There's not going to be, I'll tell you this and then I completely don't uphold my word. And trust is a commodity that really doesn't have a value. Like it's something that is so difficult to earn. Once you break it, it's so difficult to re-earn it, but that's a solid framework that you can accomplish work through, is having a team that trusts you, that's ready to jump into the fray because they know you're a truth teller, and that when you tell them it's possible, they're like, let's go. What are we doing, Miss Nikki?
Right. Yeah.
And from my dad's perspective, like, you met my dad. He's never met a stranger in his entire life. I love this about this man. And I take a lot of who I am socially from like taking a page from his book, just being able to connect well with people, and relationships are the sort of breeding ground of great things. Like if you can build instant relationships, like if I'm working with the implementation team and I walk into a classroom, I've never met this teacher before, but I can connect with her and build a relationship with her, then I have a way to continue the conversation about what it is I can bring to the table for her teaching practice, for her classroom, for her children. And the other thing that my dad taught me, I will never, ever forget, and that I try to pass on as often as possible, because I'm a female in leadership, and it brings with it certain challenges, and you have to work a little extra harder in certain things. But my dad loved to tell this story about him when he first graduated welding school, and he got a job with a company called JWE as a welder. And all the other welders in the shop, they're grubby. They have their, like from the acetylene torch, they have like the black on the face and calloused fingers. And they all come in, with like jeans and a t-shirt or mechanic overalls. And then here walks in my dad every single day in a button down, hair combed nicely, a pencil behind the ear, pocket protector. And they all made fun of him. Like, what do you think, you're going to manage the joint? And then he'd put on his coveralls and he'd go to work. But sure enough, he made his way through the ranks to so that he was eventually sitting in the executive office.
Wow.
And what he said was, he put it to me this way: dress for the job that you want to have. But when I interpret that, when I take that in, it's not just about the clothes that you're wearing, right? It's about projecting confidence. It's about having a very sharp vision of where you're going. Like, that's my goal, and I'm making it very clear I'm getting there. And when you have that, then you're always going to be taking steps to get there. When you have no really crystallized goal in your life, then there's times that you'll find yourself directionless. I'm like, ooh, what do I need to do next? How do I accomplish this? So those are things that my dad probably didn't even internalize how wise those words were of his. But I hand that to other female leaders that I mentor all the time, that if you don't have a 1 year, a 5 year, a 10-year plan, let's work on that. If you don't have some sense of ambition, of drive, of focus, let's find what fires you up, and then we're going to develop that for you. So I think wisdom keepers in general are something that every single period in my career where there was a pivot point, where maybe I had an opportunity I didn't get before, or a change in trajectory in general, all of those came with a wisdom keeper that was ready to look at me, see my potential, pour into me as a professional. And then I continued to build on that. And so taking that template from my parents too, and being able to do that for other female leaders, I call it my side quest. My kiddos have a whole nother language these days, so I'm trying to take some of those phrases from them. Side quest is one that Soren introduced to me, and that's like, you have your main quest, right? And then your side quests come along, like if you're playing a video game where you get some extra points or you get this extra tool in your tool belt. So that's my side quest at this point in my professional journey, is making sure that, as I maybe climb the rung of a ladder or acquire a new tool, that I'm reaching behind me, I'm taking other people's hands and I'm saying, come on, let's go. We're going together. So, yeah, I mean, being a wisdom keeper also means you have to continually fill your own cup, like be looking for those other wisdom keepers that you can rub shoulders with and have great conversations like this, just walking away with those little golden nuggets that you can share. It's all good stuff.
Right. I love it. I love it. I'm running out of room with all of your awesome little quotes there. So that's
side quest. You can take that one.
Yeah, no, yeah, side quest. I'll see if the boys know that one as well. But complete side note here, just kind of on a personal level, make sure that you share this with your parents. I've noticed that there's just been some really, really, I don't know, deep heart connections during these podcasts, which is I'm just so honored to be a part of hearing these things that matter, so deeply to people. And I had the opportunity, actually, that my previous boss had the opportunity to listen to the podcast of Luke's, and he talked about Dr. Huff, and he was instrumental in my life. He was instrumental in Luke's life, and similar to a teacher, right? I mean, let's give the people their roses when they're due. So make sure that they hear this, because I'm sure it would make their day. So thank you so much for sharing.
I will.
That was so much fun. So my goodness, we could go a whole hour on that, but let's dive into a little bit of your current role and talk about the awesome work that you're doing.
Fueling Brains.
Fueling Brains. There it is. Yep. Fueling Brains. Yep. Tell me all about it.
Yeah. So Dr. Anil Karim, the CEO and co-founder, gave birth to this idea through his work in his Canadian private schools, right? So he went to achieve his doctoral degree, and through his research, he utilized the private schools he was running in Canada as kind of like the bedrock, the foundation for that research and accumulating data. And so those schools started out using Montessori philosophy as their educational pedagogy. Okay. And Montessori philosophy for early childhood education is very hands-on learning, and it's very stimulating for the left brain. So what that means is there's a logic to it, there's sequencing, there's a sense of order. Children in a Montessori program tend to flourish when it comes to focus, concentration, intrinsic motivation. They tend to be to have great vocabulary, be very self-contained, have a high level of emotional intelligence. And so what he was able to ascertain is that children in that Montessori setting, they are growing the heck out of their left brain. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience of where you meet an adult that's incredibly left brain, and you can tell, right? They can do mental math, maybe have a pocket protector. Like, I love spreadsheets. That is a left brain person through and through. But if you ask them to tell you a story off the cuff or draw you a little doodle or sing a song, they would be stumped. They're like, that's not something I do. And then you have the inverse, where you have somebody that's really right-brained and they're creative, they're great conversationists, very social, but they would like lose their glasses that they're holding in their hand, and they're never on time for an appointment, right? So what he started to look at is, what if we paired up these children's left brain experiences with half of their day spent in a right brain setting inspired by Reggio Emilia. And the Reggio Emilia approach is really about collaborative working. It's about exploration. It's about learning with your hands. It's creative problem solving, expressing your built-in creativity, exploring your imagination, right? So what he did is in his schools, he built in time for children to spend in a left brain setting, building up those left brain capabilities. Time to spend in a right brain setting where they're building up those right brain capabilities, and then pairing that up with a really strong movement program. And what happened was these children's executive functions started going off the charts. And your executive functions happening in your frontal, in the front of your brain, that's your command central of all decision-making processes. And so an individual with well-developed executive function skills is a highly effective, efficient learner.
Okay.
Like, take the example of working memory. Working memory is being able to hold information in your brain to complete a task or a series of tasks, right? So as an educator, you can understand how crucial working memory would be, because if I'm an algebra teacher and I teach, the Pythagorean theory one time, and children are able to retain it and use that to solve a series of problems, my work here is done. Sure. But you talk to most middle school teachers and we're reviewing Pythagorean theorem like one time, two times, three times, four times. We're going over and over and over again because these children don't have well-developed working memory. And working memory is just one of the intelligence areas that falls under your executive functions. So brain development became his overarching passion, and it sort of grew into this idea that education in the U.S. public school system focuses on content. And you have very strong standards for what content should be delivered at what pace. But where we're failing is we're not building children's brains to hold on to that content, right? So he talks about it as like you have a bucket, and if you think about your brain as that bucket to hold information, that if you only have a bucket that's this big, how much are you going to fit in there? Not very much.
Right.
But if you have a bucket that's massive, man, you could pour so much content in there that you're not even going to believe, and it's going to keep going.
And now, a brief commercial from today's sponsor. Hey guys, Andy Bennett's owner and president of Interactive Learning. Our awesome little company has been around for close to 20 years now, and our core purpose and mission is to empower the future of education with innovative solutions through engaging technologies and leadership programs. We are blessed to work with a wide range of markets, including K-12, trades, corporate, and government. Interactive Learning is also proud to serve our nation's JROTC programs with over 3,000 units and 500,000 cadets. For our podcast listeners today, we have a special offer just for you. It's called our Class Tech Discovery Session. This is incredibly helpful for teachers, administrators, tech personnel, really anybody involved in helping students learn with technology. Here's what you get with the Class Tech Discovery Session. It starts with a short Zoom call. We'll talk about your class needs, your wants, desires, really your class wish list of ed tech. Then we'll touch on your timelines and budgets, plus any constraints that your district might be facing. Next, we'll look at new tech and new solutions, the latest and greatest out there that might be applicable to you and your district. And if you're interested, we'll even demonstrate these crazy cool, cutting-edge technologies just for you. Finally, we'll give you an idea of costs and professional development and how we and our team will support you moving forward. Again, that is Interactive Learning's Class Tech Discovery Session. Request your session now by texting Discovery to 970-739-2229 or emailing Discovery to andy@intlrn.com. Request your school's highly informative Class Tech Discovery Session today. And now, back to the Empowered Learning Podcast.
And if you look at the trajectory of human brain development, the most ground that you can potentially gain in your entire life is between 0 and 9 years old. There's a high level of elasticity in the brain. Your executive functions are still forming. So the brain is so moldable between 0 and 9 that 6 weeks of concerted effort can get you a night and day difference in how that brain is functioning. But it's all about understanding, how do I identify executive functions? How do I build executive functions. And why is that important to me as an educator, especially when I went to school to learn how to deliver phonics. I went to school to learn how to deliver foundational math concepts, but I didn't go to school to learn how to build a brain.
Right.
And you know, kind of going back to my earlier memory of that experience of being in kindergarten with my sister, and that teacher not being able to scaffold learning to meet my needs and her needs, that's an eternal struggle for teachers everywhere, is how to scaffold learning so that my bright ones are like, they're still challenged. They're not going to get bored and turn their paper over and start doodling on the back. And my ones that are struggling are not going to get left in the dust. So what he did was pair up his brain development curriculum, teaching resources with a proprietary app that tracks the child's brain development in real time and allows the teacher to take that and say, okay, this child has no self-help skills. And if they cannot open their own, and we're talking about like maybe a pre-K or a kindergartner, right? If they can't open their own snack container, if they can't sit and pay attention for 5 minutes, if they can't hang their own jacket on the hook, if they can't zip up their pants when they're done using the potty, how much of the educator's time in the day is spent simply meeting that child's needs? And how do we build self-help skills, which is directly correlated with executive functions, so that we can get to the teaching? So the teacher can take that app and say, okay, I need to build up this child's emotional control. They can't tolerate frustration. I give them challenging work, and then I have a puddle of tears, and they throw their pencil across the floor, and they stop working. How do I build up emotional intelligence so I have a highly functioning child in my class? And then I can get to that content, and I'm like, boom, boom, boom. These children are now performing at or above grade level. So, and in Texas, as is true with many states in the US, the first tested grade level is third grade. And if you lay that over top of the fact that 0 to 9 is the time when we have the most opportunity to mold the brain, and then they're not being tested until the third grade, what we're doing is pouring all of our money into interventions at that point, because the brain has already started to solidify. And so we have reading interventionists. We have, you know, we have IEP plans. We have all of these things that are coming into play that we're investing millions of dollars in. And what is lacking is the child's executive functions, right? So rewind to 2020, the pandemic hits and most schools shut down. We have children being exposed to massive amounts of screen time, like off the charts. It just 180. Like we went from a pretty controllable amount to like we're on the screen all day, every day. Those children that were born in 2020, they're entering pre-K3 this year. And so what you see is that they have no control over their body. They have like, they'll have a hard time looking you in the eye. They can't sit still. They're popping like popcorn, right? They have no idea how to stand in line, how to sit still, how to pay attention. And so you have pre-K3, pre-K4, and kinder teachers that are, for the first 9 weeks of school, going home every day in tears. Just bawling. Like I walk in to help this one teacher, and that was at the beginning of this current school year, right? It's August 2023. And it's probably the third week of school. And I'm visiting one of my campuses, and I walk in, and the teacher, she's standing in the middle of the room. Her whole body posture, her face is just defeated, and she has tears slowly rolling down her face. And these children, have you ever seen that scene from Kindergarten Cop where like Arnold Schwarzenegger's like,
Yeah,
And they're like,
yeah, it
there's a
was
kid
that.
licking another kid's leg, someone
Yep.
dancing on the piano.
Eating glue,
It
the whole
looked like
shebang.
that.
Wow.
Yes, yes. These kids are just everywhere, and they're throwing and they're hitting and they're running, and it's chaos. It's unmitigated chaos, right?
Mhm.
So I grab the instructional coach, I grab my program director. I'm like, let's go and help. Okay.
Right.
So we start singing and we're like gently redirecting, and we start sitting kids down. And it took us a good solid 20 minutes to start to get these kids to just bring the energy down.
Right.
But this was happening in almost every classroom, pre-K3, public pre-K3, pre-K4, kindergarten across the nation this school year, because these kiddos are coming with poorly developed executive functions.
Mm-hmm. Goodness
They
gracious.
don't know how to focus and pay attention.
Right.
They can't control their body. They have zero emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
You look at them sideways and they're crying.
Yeah, right, right.
So the whole goal of the program is, let's build this child's brain. Let's build an effective learner in early childhood when we can mold the brain.
Right.
And then when we give birth to this this highly effective learner, then we're graduating them into first grade or beyond, and that teacher is gonna just be off the charts excited. Like, this child knows how to sit. This child can respond when I ask them a question. This child has critical thinking skills. This child has some independence. Like, how valuable would that be to a public school educator?
Right.
And how impactful will that be long term when we see those kiddos enter tested levels? When you have high working memory, you're going to test great, because you can hold that information in your mind and you can say, oh yeah, I know the answer to that. Oh, I know the answer to that. I can do that. Yeah. But if you have no capacity to hold that information in your head, you're not going to do great.
Yeah. Wow. That is quite enlightening. My goodness. As a longtime educator with a master's in education, I am a little bit shook, honestly, by some of the truth bombs that you just laid on us. It's really good stuff. And again, it's been a minute since I've done educational courses. My brain goes back to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think it's probably a little bit of that, but like you said, we were talking about brain development on top of just, what they need. So my goodness, that's good stuff. We're going to make sure that before we're done here, that we'll get your contact information and the website up there so people can check this out, because this needs to be happening, and this message absolutely needs to get out there to other folks. So thank you so much for sharing that. That was phenomenal. Really, really good stuff. Time flies when you're having fun. I know I say that every episode, so forgive me. I get caught in a rut here, but we're going to kind of transition here a little bit into our last section here. We're going to do a grab bag question, and I'm looking through, rather than randomizing it, I want to find a question that actually makes sense in the thing. So I'm going to look at my laundry list off to the side here, and we talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a chance to speak on this. Nikki, if you had to write a book, I don't know, just perchance, if you ever had to write a book, what would you write that about?
So I'm super excited that you asked, because I have a book that I'm working on now. And so here's the idea. Like I mentioned, I'm a female in leadership, and my own leadership journey happened in a way that, I had that minimum amount of responsibility, consistency, maturity, and my mentor looked at me and said, I know that I see more in you, and kind of promoted me into that role, but sort of left it like that. Like, I'm tossing you in the deep end, now figure it out. Right. And so many of the young leaders that I chat with have a similar story, that they were promoted into that role, but were left without a template for success. And I'm the type of person that I try to rub shoulders with people that are smarter than me, that have great experience, that have those little nuggets of wisdom. But if nobody took you by the hand and said, this is something that you can do, like you can explore this, then you're left stepping in every single pothole, running into every little barrier that you could potentially run into. So the book that I'm working on the target audience is for those individuals specifically. Like I'm 21, I just got promoted to shift manager at the Dollar General, and now what on earth do I do, right?
Right.
So when you look at a lot of the leadership, the business books that are out there, the target audience is more like your C-suite executives, like white collar worker, that they have the basics figured out, but they're trying to polish their approach. They're trying to become a better leader. So what I have is an outline for actionable advice, right? So taking some of my own stories, some of those of friends and colleagues that I've worked with in the past, and saying, you know what, this is exactly how you can navigate this situation. And so I'm really excited to work on that. My friend Derek, who is an illustrator, has offered to do some situational comic strips to insert in there. And there's a lot of enthusiasm from the community, and I think it's specifically for that reason, that leadership can be very disorienting. It can, and initially the experience is very lonely, because you might have been promoted from a pool of coworkers that were your work friends, your colleagues, your cohort, and now suddenly you have to figure out how to lead them well. And I, as a young leader, stepped in all the potholes. It was so stressful. It was so alienating. And then when I met my very first mentor, I did something that I didn't realize how valuable it was at that moment, but it helped me gain an actual mentor. And so it was a individual that I admired. She was really successful, is still successful. And I asked her, I had called her up, and I thought, she definitely doesn't have time to talk to me extensively. But all I said was, could you give me like one specific piece of advice that you felt like was really helpful in your own career? Just one very concrete example. What would that one thing be? And she pointed me at Simon Sinek's Start with the Why.
Love that.
Yeah. So I read the book, and then all I did was go back to her and I said, I read the book. This was my major takeaway, and this is what I'm doing with it, right? She was like, let's talk again. And so she gave me another piece of advice, and I went and did it. And then I came back, and she became my mentor, and not because I went to her like, hey, will you be my mentor? Because that I'm assuming that could be very overwhelming.
Off-putting, right?
That sounds like a time investment. Typically, successful people are very limited in the amount of time they can spend. But I accidentally did something really good there. And I want to be able to hand those little pearls of wisdom to other individuals and say, like, it doesn't have to be lonely. It doesn't have to be super stressful. We can figure this out.
I love it. So as you're saying that last piece right there, I feel like I'm a pretty good communicator, but as you were mentioning that, I'm like, man, I probably came on a little strong to a few people. So there's a few apologies and reframes that I need to do from that little piece of wisdom right there. Because you don't want to come on too strong, which anyways, lesson learned. Thank you for that. That's
right.
Really
exactly. So, the more people we can help avoid those little pitfalls.
For sure.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea of a title or a date on that yet? And if not, that's fine. Just wondering.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to a summer publishing.
Okay.
And I have a working title that is Yes, But.
Okay.
And it comes from the idea that, there's a thought process behind yes and, right? So you want to make sure that you have momentum and that you're clarifying and that sort of thing. But for a young leader just starting out, I think that there's a sense of urgency to have some traction, but in your mind, all the buts are coming up, like, oh crud, but this, but that, but this, but that, and how to navigate those, right?
Sure.
So yes, but a guide to the young manager's journey is sort of the working title. We'll see if it sticks. But yeah, I'm really excited about that. I have a Thursday afternoon leadership session that's a little bit of a hodgepodge of individuals that have just kind of come together during the course of my professional career, and we learn together. We spend Thursday afternoons. Sometimes I'll see the topic, sometimes someone else will bring something to the table, and we share experiences, ideas on that, and it's a great way to refine your thinking.
For sure.
And I find it that I learned just as much from them as they're learning from me, and having that community and that sense of that we're all on this journey together, and not, I say it all the time, I'm a work in progress. I don't have it all figured out, but my goal is to continually share those little pearls and nuggets of wisdom with as many other people that might need them as possible.
I love it. I love it. Very good. Thank you so much for that. All right, we're going to finish up our fun little episode right here. And again, I probably should have started at the beginning like, man, there's so many nuggets here. We probably should have split this into two, but there's too many good things to.
You invite me back in the future, we'll do it.
There we go. We'll dive in deeper. So, all right. So everybody gets 3 questions at the end of the Empowered Learning podcast. So question number 1, Nikki, is who is the leader that you most admire and try to emulate?
Dr. Maria Montessori, hands down.
All right.
So she was a scientist at heart, smart, super skilled observer, but a huge heart, right? So a lot of the work that she did when she was formalizing her educational philosophies was in orphanages in Calcutta, India.
Oh, really?
And in India, there's caste society where if you are poor, if you're abandoned, people would not even physically touch you because you're like a throwaway. But she looked at these children and she saw their value, she saw their potential, and the value of hands-on play, and really could observe what's happening inside. There's no MRI back in early 20th century when she was doing this work, right?
Sure.
I think she published her book in like 1912, don't quote me. Anyways, but she was able to watch children at play and ascertain what's going on inside, but love them at the same time. And I feel like there's a lot of ways that I try to emulate that for myself. I love children, and you see how they respond to that affection. Like, they might not know me from Adam, but when I walk into the room, they're like, I'm curious and interested in what they're doing, and in turn they're curious and interested about me. And there is this special moment of connection that I feel like that comes from that place of a deep respect and affection for children. I love that about her.
I love it. That's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Let's jump into question number 2. We are at the beginning of 2024 right now.
We are.
So looking back on 2023, I know that you are a lifelong learner. What would you say is your most impactful learning over the last year?
Yeah, so my core team and we went through this journey of obtaining a brain development certification.
Oh, okay.
And it was so revelatory. And it not just in the sense of adding a tool to your professional tool belt, but really understanding how your own brain is working and functioning.
Okay.
And when I look at my own children and understanding what I'm doing right to build their brains and how I could reach them a little bit more efficiently, that process, that coursework was intense. There was moments where I was like, my brain is full, can I be dismissed? But it was so incredibly valuable, and I'm grateful to the organization for that, because learning is something that you get to hold on to for life. Nobody takes that away from you. So that was a really cool experience.
I love it. That sounds wonderful. I can feel your passion on that whole thing, and obviously that fits right in with fueling brains. But that's very good. So we'll have to dive into that more next time. Last question. You as a long-time, lifelong educator, so thinking of your kids, thinking of your clients, thinking of just society as and in general, how would you empower learning for future generations?
Yeah, I think that it pairs up nicely with the project that I'm doing, but also my personal viewpoint on how valuable early childhood education is specifically. You know, there's that saying that everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten.
Yeah, right.
And what that really is getting to the meat of is that children are forming who they are. The seeds of all the greatness live inside of them from day one.
Right.
And when they have educators that really nurture and embrace and respect who they are as individuals, there we could literally change not just education, but society, our economy, the government. And I think, you know, to me, play should be a right of every child, just like you need water, you need breath, you need food. You should have opportunities for play. It is that crucial. And nobody ever looks back on their own education experience and is like, I remember that workbook that I did really well and I got a gold star on it and my handwriting was so nice. Nobody thinks about that.
Right.
But you could probably recall the first time you went to the zoo or your first encounter with, you know, maybe milking a cow, if you ever had that opportunity, you know. Those things, those experiences are forming who you are as a person. And if we can get that into more children's realm of possibilities, I think big things could happen.
So this just came to me. Here we go. So if we say experiences form children, what would be the flip side of that? So you said at the beginning, you know, United States education is terrible about focusing on tests, focusing on curriculum. What is the inverse of that? If experiences form children, you know, workbooks don't. I mean, it's something to that effect. What would
workbooks don't? Yeah, exactly. And slowly but surely over time, you know, in a third or a fifth grade classroom, right, you would see desks and a chalkboard and you would expect some textbooks and workbooks to go along with it. But that has creeped down and down into lower levels until you walk into a pre-K3 classroom and they're sitting at desks and they're expected to do paperwork. But, you know, you take like, I think it was like 1988, 1989, the baseball study that was looking at reading comprehension, right? And so children that had a high knowledge of baseball and a low ability to read were scoring almost as high as children with high reading ability because of the experiences that they had. That maybe they had gone to a baseball game, or they talk about it with their dad, or they play in the backyard, and their comprehension was right in par with those high level readers because of the experiences that they had. And that doesn't come from a workbook. That doesn't come from rote memorization. It comes from being, you know, getting your hands in it and taking it apart. And I think of my grandfather, there was a story about him as a 9-year-old taking apart the central heating and cooling system of the house and how upset his parents were. But then he went on to join IBM's think tank and he was part of the project that made the barcode.
Wow.
That thinking came from his experiences. Let's take it apart. Let's figure out how it works. Let's put it back together. Let's change it up. So had he not had an opportunity for the tinkering, for the hands-on, maybe he would never have attained that level of thinking that would be required to work on a project at that level.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So to all the parents out there that have tinkerers, I am one of those.
Yes. Tinker away.
There is a purpose behind that, and it will make a difference. So very good. It
will.
Yeah. Nikki, thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight. It's great to just see you personally and reconnect on this, but my goodness, you just had so many little nuggets here. So I'm excited to get this out there and let everybody hear that. Before we wrap up, the fuelingbrains.com, is that correct? Is that the right website?
That's the one, fuelingbrains.com.
So definitely check that out. And I will put Nikkie's contact information, her LinkedIn in the show notes as well. So thanks again, Nikkie. Appreciate your time, and we'll have to do this again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andy.
All right.
Take care, my friend.
Bye.
Bye-bye.